Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Santiago, Resident Services Administrator with CMHA. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's presenter is Ms. Angel Jacobs, Director of Operations. It's not a movement, it's a movement organization. This organization is community-based that supports families and promotes mental wellness. Their Sustaining Families initiative supports expecting mothers and caregivers of children under 2 years of age through Cuyahoga County. Please welcome Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, hello and welcome to all. Greatly appreciate the opportunity here. I think that the conversation around health and wellness that surrounds all those good things, emotional, mental, spiritual, stress management, all those good things. I'm really excited to be here. So we are going to go ahead and have our presentation today. I want to give you a little bit of information about myself, which is actually inside the presentation. So if you all want to, we can go ahead and get started with the presentation and then I'll flow from there. And it will also have an ability for me to introduce myself in the first couple of slides. Okay, awesome. All right, so I am Angel Jacobs. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Highest Enterprises, which is a real estate investment and an HR consulting practice. What I do by trade is I help people with the human resource administrative parts of their business. I can consult to do that for organizations. And then I am a real estate investor, which means technically I am a landlord. I have some residential properties in Cuyahoga County, and I house families for better quality of life. That is my mission. During the day, I am also the director of operations for a local community nonprofit called It's Not a Moment, It's a Movement. And I do most of my work there during executing programming. One of our programs right now is called the Sustaining Families Initiative, where we are assisting expecting moms and new moms with a couple of different ways to sustain their life. And we'll talk about how that impacts health and wellness as well. Also, I have some board commitments that I am affectionate toward. I am the board secretary for Village of Healing, which is a clinic here in the Cuyahoga County area for maternal health care. And I am also an advisory member of the Him and Me Foundation. So that's just a little bit about me. I want to connect why my work connects to the mission of this health and wellness conversation. So when we're talking about housing is much more than shelter. We all know that. It is the foundation for quality of life. Your overall health depends on what are the things, the internal and external factors that just really lead to what your quality of life is. And as a private landlord, my goal is to house families to help them in the sustainability of their journey. Housing becomes the most critical thing, in my opinion, next to food, in terms of is a household stable at the time. My work with the local nonprofit It's Not a Moment, It's a Movement speaks to the commitment of strengthening families, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, mental health, all of those things that give a compass on the question, how do you feel today? What is your wellness check today? Sometimes it's not just about a diagnosis of health and wellness, but just the question of how does one feel today? Did you wake up today and all the things that you thought were going to go right started going wrong, and it kind of leads you into this spiral of a journey? So we always want to be conscious of the question, even throughout the day, asking the people around us, are they okay? My community engagements connects to this work and in this topic because of the programming in which we do. The local nonprofit that I work for, It's Not a Moment, It's a Movement. We are really good at building support systems and creating programming that will help individuals, families, hence communities, begin to sustain themselves and elevate themselves. And that is really what's important. So, here in our conversation, health and wellness in the community addresses three major things: physical, mental, and emotional. And so, you know, the old adage, the proverb that says, it takes a village. That African proverb is important. And in conjunction to it, though, before we can get to it takes a village, we have to do some things that focus directly on our practical daily tools or our individual survival. So I am hoping that this conversation that we have for the next 30 minutes or so will give us some practical information and some daily tools on coping. So the goal is to improve stability, right? That word of resilience, the ability to bounce back from things when things aren't going quite the way we design it. That lends to our overall well-being. And if anyone has a question while we are having this conversation, this is a free flow. So please feel free to join in and ask that question. I'll be checking the chat a little bit later to see if you all drop some questions in there. Right now, my screen is shared, so I'll get to that toward the end. But let's talk about housing. This invitation came by way of Cleveland Metropolitan Housing Authority. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a good piece of conversation about how housing connects to health and wellness. And so the provision of housing is consistent, a consistent place to sleep. Are you safe? Safe from violence, harm, exposure, right? Housing promotes routines and daily structure. This leads to the excellence, the quality of life that you're able to live and provide for yourself and your family. So when we are talking about health and wellness, we are talking about the three S's. We try to make this practical and grabbable for people. The three S's would be shelter. Shelter then lends to your stability and your safety. This is how all things health and wellness connect back to that fundamental practice of housing. Are you housed? Are you safely housed? And do the housing that you're currently living in, does it provide stability for you? When we're talking about the housing, the security of it all, stabilization, the question comes up about your emotional regulation, because when you are not housed or when housing is problematic in any way, it promotes stress. And we'll talk about how to deal with that. But in the opposite view, when you do have a housing situation that is permanent, temporary if necessary, but gives you some form of stability, you can start to begin to track your strategic small wins, which is important, and we'll talk about that. So the quote here would be, we may not be able to control everything around us, but we can build tools to manage how we respond when our housing is stable. So the goal is stable housing so that we can begin to create a life around us of stability. What are some of the stress factors? Homelessness, of course. Anytime that we're facing eviction, when we have bills to pay, when the environment is unsafe, or even the idea of overcrowdedness. Sometimes there's too many people in a home and things begin to get chaotic, or it produces an environment of chaos. So we want to manage that. How do you manage that? Resource awareness. I like to say all the time that we only know what we know. So it is very important for those who have information to be sharing those things. All of our community partners, all of our community liaisons and organizations and nonprofits that are doing things that will be able to assist the housing crisis, the housing stability, the stress of it all. It is important that we make ourselves aware of those resources so that we can utilize them. Also, when we talk about management, we want to talk about managing our stress load by making sure that we are empowering ourselves with some levels of financial literacy. And not at the grandiose level, but at the basic level: bill payment, budgeting, understanding monetary terms. What does money do? How can we utilize it to the best of our ability? Also, the reassessment of your environment. Sometimes your housing situation can be fine and conducive for a moment, but then you have to reassess. Have I outgrown this environment? Do I need to go to another level? Do I need to readdress this situation and move? Has my family size increased? Do we need different housing? All of those things in the reassessment of the environment. And that can happen as many or as often as it needs to. While we're talking about stress management, especially as it is applicable to housing, it is always going to be important to think about that in terms of your self-care as well. Running a household, making sure that you are housed, making sure that that space is conducive for you. You also have to make sure that individually you are taking time for yourself to make sure that the self-care that you need is okay. The question of are you okay also includes what are you doing for your self-care? Not helping others, not doing anything else, not managing the bills, not managing the problems, but are you doing something for you? That is self-care. That's going to lend us into our strategic planning of this cycle of making sure that the plan is sufficient constantly and consistently, and if we need to change it. Now, this idea of celebrating small wins, that's a way of coping. So the question became, when you have your conversation today, Angel, about self-care and mental health and wellness, we need to talk about what it looks like to celebrate the small wins, because sometimes we get so enthralled in the big wins and we get so focused on the outcome in the future that we forget that those stair steps of what we are doing matter. So if you paid a bill today, if you made it to your appointment today, if you kept your cool today, right? The idea of problem solving during the day. If you showed up for yourself today, if you've learned something new, or if you just simply took, and I encourage everyone on the call and everyone that is listening to make it a practice to start to take 30 minutes to even an hour. And if you can't get 30 minutes, start to carve out 5, 10, 15 minutes just for yourself. If that means you are sitting, listening to music, reading a book, having something to eat peacefully, sitting in your car, walking, doing something that is only going to affect you, something for yourself. And it needs to be a daily practice. So start with 5 minutes, build up to 10, get to a place where you are making sure that you're carving out 15 to 30 minutes. All of these things are important in terms of your health and well-being. In relationship to housing resources, right? Let's make this personal here in terms of that. There are 3 different categories of what those resources could be and how those resources are allocated to the Cleveland and Cuyahoga community. There's emergency, transitional, and permanent housing options. There's rental assistance and eviction prevention. And then there's support services for individuals and families. So if you are on the call or you're listening and you are having some stress about your housing, here are the areas of resources that we're going to talk about that you can then tap yourself into so that we can begin to figure out ways to decrease those stress levels. In terms of emergency housing and shelter, I want you to write this down. Make sure you are aware of it. 211, the number 211 is for coordinated intakes and shelter access. If you call that number, they'll be able to hand guide you into some resources to help you. Emergency shelters, transitional housing is also available. And then for those supports for individual families experiencing homelessness, we have some additional resources we'll talk about. Programs, what does that look like? Of course, Cleveland Metropolitan Housing Authority has been an absolute pillar in the community in terms of supportive housing. We also have additional resources that people can tap themselves into for Housing First is an initiative. Luther Metropolitan Ministries, they have resources for shelter and housing. Eaton, write these resources down. I want to make sure that you leave here with some information. Rapid rehousing and housing support services. Eaton can also be a resource for that. But when we're talking about stress, we also want to talk about what are the resources that we can grab for that can help me decrease that stress. Additional housing resources for you to know in terms of stability and prevention. Step Forward, CEOGC, and they have resources that will be able to impact rent, utility, prevention support. Famico Foundation, they do housing counseling and eviction prevention there. Benjamin Rose, rental counseling and tenant education. All of these things are important. So if you need to decrease your stress load around housing, if you are in a situation where housing is what is causing you the most stress, here are some additional resources for that. And we want to make sure that we give you some other long-term options with some of the HUD programs that are affordable for affordable housing, CMHA, of course, for public housing and housing vouchers. These programs also are able to help with down payment assistance programs and availability for that. I would also throw out there, if you know licensed real estate agents or those who are working in the real estate field, oftentimes those people become really good resources for who has assistance programs, down payment programs, and other public housing programs because they're in that industry. I would urge you and encourage you to reach out to those individuals and seek greater information from them. In terms of rental and financial assistance, Cleveland Housing Network, they partner with rent assistance and deposit. Salvation Army typically has some resources for rent and utility support. Catholic Charities, I think if I'm not mistaken, they may have a wait list going now, but they have emergency financial assistance. In terms of tenant support and advocacy, the Cuyahoga County Housing Court always has information on tenant rights, landlord rights, those things that Cleveland Metropolitan Housing Authority also has information about those things. You want to be well versed. One of the other keys to decreasing your stress load to improve your health is the amount of information that you can consume so that you can have a guide for yourself. They also will be able down at the Cuyahoga County, they also have legal and advocacy support that is also available. So the key takeaway as we move away from housing and move into some other things is that housing resources are available at every level of need. And what's important is that early connection to resources is what prevents crisis. So if you are looking to talk about your housing situation, the earlier the better that you can make connection to these resources will then put you in a position to create a situation of stable housing, which ultimately, which is why we're having a conversation today, improves your health and your wellness outcomes. Now, here's my power line in terms of a catch-all, because your overall wellness depends on your healing journey, it depends on your wellness journey. And the quote here is that healing doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires consistent support and small daily steps. And that's important to realize and hopefully brings you back to a space. I want to move here to what the definition of or understanding stress. This conversation is based in healing, and we want to make sure that we're talking about health and the overall implications of that. And stress is the body's response to challenges. Short-term stress leads to chronic stress, and chronic stress is harmful to health. Here is some statistical data. 70% of adults report that stress affects physical health. Chronic stress increases risk of heart disease. High stress links to anxiety and depression. These are things that we have to understand and note because stress by the numbers is critical. How stress affects the body. Increased blood pressure is probably one of the highest ways that it does that. One of the most visible ways, I should say, weakens the immune system. Sleep disruption, hormonal imbalance, right? All of these things are happening because the body is being affected by stress, which is why we have to be very careful about our stress levels. High stress levels are dangerous, just period and point blank, they're dangerous. Barriers, housing, access to care, financial strain, things of those natures, health disparities lead to long-term, that's also a long-term community impact. So every day when we're talking about why this matters, it matters because stress is problematic. We want to make sure that we're doing these things to control our stress levels. How does stress affect the mind? It does that. Anxiety. Some of us, we wake up anxious, depression, difficulty focusing, emotional overwhelm, or work. A lot of us have work burnout. These things, this promotes stress and it affects the mind. The impact of stress, physical fatigue. I said one of the most visible things, at least as we have noted in the health industry, is high blood pressure, mental anxiety, and burnout. It affects your productivity and your quality of life. So, what are the things, Angel, that we can do for stress management, the strategies behind that? At a very practical level, there's breathing techniques. Sometimes you just got to take a moment and just regroup, refocus, slow yourself down. Breathing techniques, there's so many different ways that they can do breathing, that we can all do breathing exercises, but think about breathing techniques. Think about your time management. Think about taking breaks. Another play into your self-care. Are you slowing down enough to take care of yourself? Pause, breathe, reset. These are things that help us with our stress management. Self-care. Let's talk about the workplace. If you're at work, because a lot of us spend that, they say 2/3 of our time is at work or with our work colleagues or thinking about work, preparing for work. So you got to make sure you're taking breaks. Hydration and nutrition. We can't move away from that. Hydration and nutrition. Set boundaries. And I encourage everyone, use your PTO, your paid time off. And sometimes if you don't have paid time off, you can kind of maybe sometimes negotiate. If I stay late tomorrow, can I leave early the next day? Talk to your managers about what that looks like, but using your time. Time is valuable. Daily practices of this, 5-minute breathing exercises. List out your top 3 priorities and then spend your time working on those. Don't overwhelm yourself. Stretching, walking, exercises, those things. Not that you have to go to a cardio class or go run a marathon, but daily stretching, yoga if you have time. And some of these things that you can find on your devices, and you can play a video and go along with it. Walks just around the corner. Positive self check-in. And I cannot stress enough about positive self check-ins. The way that you speak life into yourself, the way that you speak life around yourself is important, and it will change your journey. So let's kind of put these things together. Understanding mental health. Mental health impacts emotional and physical well-being. We talked about that anxiety, depression, right? We can also include trauma, postpartum depression. These things are also affected when your health is not being looked at. And so when we talk about faith and mental health, what I do want to point out here on this particular slide, and this I have to give credit to the CEO of It's Not a Moment, It's a Movement, and one of our initiatives, Mentally Mangle the Faith Movement. He has a quote that says, theology does not replace therapy, and therapy does not replace theology. And what that means is that it doesn't matter what you or who you believe in. What we are saying is that coupled with whatever your faith is, there is an opportunity for therapy and counseling and professional settings where people can help you walk through things and decompress and unpack what you need to unpack. Mental and emotional wellness. Now, this is going to include your emotional stability and the coping ability that you have. This affects your relationships, be it work, be it parenting, be it relationships, but it requires daily care and support. So often here you've heard the theme of what are we doing consistently and daily that will affect our mental health, our emotional health. Those things are important. We talked about the breathing, the mindfulness of it, physical activity, talking to someone that you trust, or even a clinical licensed professional. Journaling. I think that that's critical. I often encourage people to write their thoughts out, write their to-do list out, their task out. If you do that, you begin to build structure for yourself. These are healthy coping strategies. Unhealthy coping strategies to avoid, right? Because sometimes you can get so overwhelmed, it might lead to substance misuse, isolation for long periods of time. Sometimes you do need to have a me moment, but long periods of time of isolation aren't necessarily the greatest thing at the end. Overeating, undereating, right? Or simply just avoiding the problems. You want to address those things in a strategic way, a healthy way, devise a plan for your wellness. Self-care practices. Want to get enough sleep. I sometimes fall victim to that myself. Want to eat balanced meals, just eating better. And we can do these things step at a time. These are not going to change overnight. Taking breaks during the day, setting boundaries. There's a repeat theme here. Daily twos. So for our residents and our community members who are on the phone, here's what I want you to write down. I want you to start making 5 minutes, taking 5 minutes to do some breathing exercises, some self breathing exercises. I want you to start writing in moments where you can take a short daily walk, just even around the corner or through the house, to giving yourself some physical moments. Start writing down positive affirmations so you can check in with how you're feeling daily, your emotions on a regular. It builds resilience when you do that. The ability to bounce back from the challenges is strongly connected to the routines that you have created and built that will help you get through things, strengthening you through support and a skill, learning how to be involved with your daily practices that are keeping you focused. Important. Focusing on your growth and your ability to adapt. So if we were going to talk about housing and the health connection, stable housing reduces stress and improves mental health outcomes, increases access to healthcare and resources because now you are looking for ways to be better. And those are going to lead you to those resources. Housing stability statistics, we talked about those, but here's some things that are critical to understand so that we take this very seriously. When we have unstable housing, it has been said to be linked to higher ER visits because the overall health of the individual starts to decrease. Stable housing improves health outcomes, which is why it is important for one of our number one goals is to make sure that we are housed appropriately and so we can reduce our anxiety and even decrease our depression. What support looks like: access to mental health services if you need those, community programming. Local nonprofits are all throughout the city offering all kinds of programming. Housing assistance, there are also all kinds of programs that are offering housing assistance, and peer support networks. That idea that we talked about in the beginning about it takes a village. How can we begin to build that village around ourselves that offers support and the support networks that we need? Small daily actions create big change. I don't want people to get overwhelmed with the idea that to get better, it has to be a massive change, a massive overhaul. Small daily actions. Support systems matter. Healthy communities start with healthy individuals. So you are important. Unhealthy coping, we talked about those things, that misuse of substance, isolation, overworking. Awareness helps change those behaviors. Talking to people, journal, exercising, seeking support. Here's what I want to do. I want to identify a call to action. I want you to identify a list of what may be harming you, what's stressing you out. Is it housing? Is it resources? Is it food? Is it work? Is it pleasure? What are those things? Is it health related? Because what we want to do is we want to start to outline what are you doing to cope and manage that. Cope and manage, because there's strategies about coping and then there's strategies about manage it. We want to devise a plan for that well-being. That is your call to action. So what I want to do now is I want to stop sharing my screen there. And I want to make sure that I get in the chat and answer some questions. And then I want to talk lastly about a Sustaining Families initiative that we have. If there's any expecting moms or new moms on the program, on the call here, because we know that stress is one of the most leading ways in health disparities and will lead to infant mortality. And we know that, especially for particular groups of people, that these things can be 2 to 3 times more. So it's not a moment, it's a movement. That I am the director of operations. We have an amazing program called Sustaining Families Initiative. We are helping expecting moms and new moms sustain themselves and decrease their stress. And we do that by offering educational workshops that pour back into those moms, into those families about financial literacy, maternal care, nutrition, health, and wellness, faith and mental health. All of these things are absolutely free. All of these resources are free. When we start talking about health disparities, food, transportation, we offer resources that will help them with food cards, will help them with bus tickets, Uber rides, it will help them with gas cards, ways to get to the appointments that they need to get to, or get to work, or get to school. We want to address those issues. We also do that by doing a cohort of a family fee, because we do know that not everybody has support, right? Family support, not everybody has family support, friend support. So what we want to do is start to build that community support, start to build that village that we're speaking of. And so we do that by creating the program in such a way that moms come in into a cohort and they can start to build relationships with other moms who have the same lived experience, who can speak to them about parenting, motherhood, hurdles, challenges, things that they have gone through, and begin to build a relationships, not just for them, but for their children as well. And if you are interested in that particular program or know someone who's interested in that program, I will drop in the chat a phone number, and all you have to do is text 216-773-4006. And if you text the word mom, it'll get you on your journey. All right, I want to take a look here in the chat here. Let me flick it open and see if by chance there are, these are good questions. Oh, fantastic. Yes, thank you, Anna. What is the biggest source of stress, right? That's going to be individualized. Now, statistically, people are going to chart that housing becomes the biggest form of stress or the source of stress. But there are other data points that will also tend to lean toward the uncertainty of anything. When people are uncertain about their health, about where they're going to live, about what's happening with them, about even where to get information. Anytime there's uncertainty, there's a playground that breeds stress. What are some red flags that tell you you need help? Fatigue, anger, confusion, right? When you start to realize that your fuse is really, really short, right? When you start to realize that you are not operating the way that you used to operate, or you start showing up in ways that you don't want to show up or you don't normally show up, the body will give you some clues to that mentally and physically. When your health starts to decrease, that's typically inflammation. Inflammation is stress, right? It can start to lead to all kinds of different things. What habits can I adopt or stop to improve my well-being? Anna, these are wonderful questions. Habits that you can start or you can adopt. One of the greatest gifts are your own self-reflection. So journaling or writing, not even just journaling, just grab a piece of paper or even if you're on your phone and you got that little note app, right? Start to type in and identify things that are making you feel good and things that are not making you feel good, and then start to figure out what you can do to make those things better. Those become your habits. How you wake up in the morning. If the first thing that you do is grab the phone, right? You might be promoting stress because you're overconsumed. Could be. That's not everybody's story, but could be. Maybe you take your 5 minutes a day that we talked about. Maybe you take it in the morning before you do anything else with anybody else. You take 5-15 minutes if you got it, and just be with yourself. Maybe you do some prayers, some meditation. Maybe you do some yoga stretches, but start to figure out a routine. Another good habit. Great question, and another good habit. Write out what your routine is, so that you can start to become very disciplined on what that routine is, things that you can take out. If you have found that you have started to lean more heavy on your vices, whatever those vices are, right? You can gauge what that is. You may need a moment where you have to say, hey, I am now overindulging in some things, and I want to be very proactive, and I want to start to write those things down so that you can be very aware of them. A lot of habit building and habit breaking is about awareness. what things are working and what things are not. How can we reach your organization for services? Fantastic. So we have two websites. It's a movementohio.org. We also have mentallymangled.com, and that number 216-773. And I'm going to put these things. So give me a second here. Maybe can I type here? Let me see. While I look at some of these other questions, I will do my best here to put these things in the chat. But yes, we have mentallymangled.com. That's our Mentally Mangled and Faith kind of initiative. If you want to be a part of the Sustaining Families Initiative, you will dial 216-773-4006 and text the word mom. Tons of information will come your way. Or our umbrella organizational website is itsamovementohio.org. Great question. So let's see here. Oh, thank you. Let me see if I have any other questions in the chat. These were very good questions. So yeah, so on that recap there, we still have a few minutes here. It looks like we're approaching 12:40, but I do want to make sure that people have time if they want to drop some more questions in there. And just reiterate that health and wellness is a question of how you feel today. It's not necessarily always a diagnosis, but if we do not get control over how we feel, it can very well lead to a diagnosis. And sometimes that is just anxiety or depression. Now, if there's some other things that may be clinically going on, then yes, we need to then have some connection to some of our clinical providers where we can start to figure out what is the best route for healing or medical advisory on that end. But in terms of just daily practice, you want to make sure that you are being aware of yourself. I cannot stress awareness enough. And when you are being aware of how you're showing up, you can start to identify what things are triggering you or what things are simply irritating you and the difference between those. When you're triggered by something, it will throw you back into a space of like an open wound, right? So you can kind of start to identify those things. Those may lead you down a path where we may need to have some clinical intervention or maybe some conversation on another level. But if you're irritated because life is just life and it's throwing you these curveballs and you're simply trying to keep your head above water, with that comes identifying what that irritation is, and then you can now create answers or coping strategies for those things so that you don't have that irritation now that you know those things irritate you. But there is a significant difference between triggering and irritation. And in a very practical knowledge, the trauma of a trigger is going to throw you back into a place or something or reminder of an open wound. If it doesn't do that, then you're probably just irritated, and we can walk through that in a different practical way. That makes sense. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna check the chat here, see if there's any other questions there. Rose, Anna, do you all have any other additional questions you would like for me to answer? Okay, let me see if I can get my computer to type. Oh, I think I'm in here now. Yes, okay. Here we go. Let me get in the chat. I'm going to also put my cell phone in here for work, because if you all have any questions that as you've watched this or you say overnight or you think of something and as you come up with those things, feel free to reach out, because sometimes while it's happening, it doesn't click with you. But I also am a resource navigator, I like to say. And so if you think of something, I don't want you to leave here without the ability to be able to contact and say, hey, I thought about this, or I'm struggling with this. Are there any resources that you can direct me to or that you and your organization have individually? So I'm going to put my cell phone in there as well. And then for the, put that there, for the Sustaining Families Initiative, when we talked about the moms, Sustaining family. I'm going to put the cell phone number. It's a text campaign. You text the word mom, and then we will then insert the journey for you. We'll start to get that contact and communication to you. Sustaining families, which is about the moms. I'm going to put that in there. The number is 216, good to say it again, 773 4006. And I'm going to check something really quickly because I want to make sure nothing is worse than wrong information. And because that's the text number, I want to make sure that I have it corrected here. 773-4007. Look at there. 216-773-4007. And all you have to do is text the word mom. So text the word mom, and we will take it from there. I also want to put in here our mentally, and we have a conference coming up, mentallymangled.com. We have a conference coming up the first weekend in May. And if you go to mentallymangled.com, you can register for the conference. It's completely free. The conference is helping families navigate their journey of health and wellness. So very applicable. There's all kinds of workshops and breakout sessions that you can take, as many as you want, or as less or as few as you want. And all you have to do is go to mentallymangled.com and you can register. The day before, on Friday, is our All City Revival, absolutely free. It will be at Mount Sinai Friendship Baptist Church on Woodland. I think it's 7510 Woodland Avenue. But you'll get all that information at mentallymangled.com if you register for the revival and conference. I encourage you to bring your whole family, anyone that you know. It will be a moment of healing, and the conference is surrounded by all things health and wellness and mental health and how all those things connect. The conference itself is specifically surrounding helping families navigate that journey. So you want to be there. That's going to be really good. Mentallymangled.com for the revival and the conference. That's going to be May 1st and May 2nd, which is Friday and Saturday. And if you are in a need current day, I want you to use my cell phone number there, 216-926-7955. I'm Angel Jacobs of It's Not a Moment, It's a Movement. And I also act as a resource navigator, and I will be happy to help point or direct you to some resources, whether that's housing, whether that's food, whether it's other resources, transportation, mom's program, mental health, if you're looking for a counselor or a therapist, all of those good things. You only know what you know. So a part of being healthy is being the most aware. And so let me make you aware of these things that can help you. And we hope to hear from you soon.